Okay, well, sorry. My mother called and interrupted our video. They'll be easier to upload this way anyway. We stopped on Daisy. And folks, Daisy, she's a piece of work. Um, we'll get to her soon, okay? But we do begin with Nick. And Nick tells us about where he comes from, where he's living right now in West Egg. And he talks about the fashionable places across in East Egg and how they glitter along the water. And he says that on this evening, I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. And Daisy was my second cousin once removed, and I'd known Tom in college. And just after the war, I'd spent 2 days with them in Chicago. So that's the link, okay? Nick is vaguely related to Daisy, second cousin once removed, whatever that means. But he also knew Tom when they were in college. So he had seen them last when they were in Chicago. So we get some really cool descriptions of these characters. And I'm going to read some of Fitzgerald's language because it's magic, okay? It really is. And I want you to hear his words. So this is about Tom, okay? We get Tom Buchanan first. Tom Buchanan, her husband, meaning Daisy's husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that had ever played football at New Haven. A national figure in a way, one of those men who reached such an acute, limited excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter of reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he brought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they came east, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully, wherever people played polo and were rich together. This was a permanent move, said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. I have no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on, forever seeking, a little wistfully, for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game. So, first thing you need to know about Tom is he's a huge has-been, okay? He was the rich boy, the football stud at New Haven, and he threw his money around like crazy, and he had his peak when he was 21, when he was at school. And now everything has been downhill since then. He's completely a has-been. He's always looking for that time again in his life, okay? So it says here that, so it happens on a warm, windy evening. I drove over to East Egg to see two old friends whom I scarcely knew at all. And he goes into a large description, which you may read on your own if you wish, but it's a big description all about their house, and it talks about everything. It's called a Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. It talks about the gardens, and it talks about the front door. It talks about the home, the French windows, everything. I mean, it's really super, just very austere and very fancy, this home that they live in. So we go back to Tom, and it says here that Tom had changed since his New Haven years. Now he was a sturdy, straw-haired man of 30 with a rather hard mouth and a supercilious manner. The word supercilious is a great word, and it's easy to remember what it means. Supercilious means superior, so he feels he's better than. So 2 shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. Not even the effeminate swank of his riding clothes could hide the enormous power of that body. He seemed to fill those glistening boots until he strained the top lacing, and you could see a great pack of muscle shifting when his shoulder moved under the thin coat. It was a body capable of enormous leverage, a cruel body. His speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor, added to the impression of fractiousness he conveyed. There was a touch of paternal contempt in it, even towards people they liked, and there were men at New Haven who had hated his guts. So, visually, he's still a very strong man, okay? He's very powerful. His body's described as being sturdy, powerful, the enormous power of the body, the great pack of muscle, body capable of enormous leverage, but also he describes it as a cruel body, okay? Tom has a gruff voice, a tenor voice, and it says that he has a paternal contempt. Paternal means like your father, and contempt means hatred. So he's kind of got the fatherly hatred kind of voice, even for people he likes. And it says, though, Nick just reminded us that there were a lot of people at college that didn't like Tom, that hated him, actually. So they get into this talk, and they're just kind of small talking. And finally, Tom says, come on, we'll go inside. And so they walk in, and it's very hot. And it's breezy because they're on the water. But remember, this isn't a time when there was no such thing as air conditioning. For those of us who are used to being cooled by artificial air conditioning, they didn't have that. So they would open up everything to try to get air in and cool the place. Men wore a three-piece suit and a starched collared shirt. I mean, it was hot, and it made you kind of hot and bothered, to be honest. And the movie that I like, and there have been a couple of movies made about this one, I really love the quote-unquote newest one, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if anybody's seen it. None of my people this morning spoke up and said that they had. Well, it's my favorite, and I love it. And if we were at school, I have the DVD right there in my drawer, and we would do it like we did our other books and our other play. We would do it in pieces, and it is very much like this book. It's almost like they took the book, and the director, his name is Baz Luhrmann, and I love him. Anyway, he's very cool. He's got a really neat style to him, but he took this book and put it into a movie. He made it into a movie. There's literal sentences from the book that are on the screen in writing. So there's things about it I really love. The characters are wonderful. And this scene where Tom brings Nick in, and these giant window coverings, these big drapes are blowing all over the room, and it's because it's hot and they've got everything open to try to cool it down. It's a really cool part in the movie too. They do it perfectly. So he comes in and he sees these two women sitting together on the couch, one of whom is Daisy. He hasn't seen Daisy in a while, but he knows her. The other one is a woman he doesn't know. And so we get Daisy. Please listen to the way that Fitzgerald describes Daisy, because it's poetic, okay? So the other girl, Daisy, made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forward with a conscientious expression, and then she laughed. An absurd, charming little laugh, and I laughed too and came forward into the room. I'm paralyzed with happiness. She laughed again, as if she had said something very witty, and held my hand for a moment, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she so much wanted to see. That was the way she had. She hinted at a murmur that was the surname of a balancing girl was Baker, the other girl in the room. I heard her murmur, but had to lean towards her to hear it. At any rate, Miss Baker's lips fluttered. She nodded at me and then quickly tipped her head back again. So I looked back at my cousin, who began to ask me questions in her low, thrilling voice. It was the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down, as if the speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Her face was sad and lovely, with bright things in it, bright eyes and a bright, passionate mouth. But there was an excitement in her voice that men who had cared for her found difficult to forget. A singing compulsion, a whispered listen. A promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since, and that there were gay, exciting things hovering in the very next hour. So, Daisy. Now, for those of you who listened to or read or both Winter Dreams, Daisy has got a very Judy Jones quality about her. She's hard to forget, okay? Fitzgerald describes the things about her almost like he describes Judy Jones. It's weird. He always talks about her eyes, her bright eyes. He talks about her mouth, and he talks about her voice. She's got a similar voice as Judy Jones in that story. And it's kind of a sing-song quality. And when you talk to Daisy, she's got that thing. She's got the quality that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world, and that she only wants to talk to you, and she's kind of waiting with bated breath for everything that you say. And to be honest, that's a very interesting quality to have. It's a pretty good characteristic, because people remember you when you're like that, and you kind of hold people in the palm of your hand. And we see that Daisy's already kind of like that, okay? So they're talking about Chicago and how he had stopped there for a day on the way, and she says, Oh, do they miss me? She cried ecstatically. The whole town is desolate, Nick says. All the cars have left and they're wearing mourning wreath and their persistent wail all night along the North Shore. And so she's all excited and she says, you ought to see the baby. And Nick says, I'd love to. She's asleep. She's 3 years old. Haven't you ever seen her? Never. Well, you ought to see her. And I must stop there because that's another reason why I cannot stand, I'm going to use the word that I don't use very often. I hate Daisy. Mostly because, you know me, I'm a mom. I'm a mom in my real life here at home to my own kids, my stepkids, but I'm a mom to you all as well. I'm Mama Clary to a lot of you. And it is so sickening to me in this book because Daisy's a mother. She has a little girl who's 3. And you will only hear about her maybe 3 times in the entire book, and you will only see or meet her once, and it's only for about 2 minutes. She is being raised by a nanny, and she's really nothing more than just an object in Daisy's life. And that hurts me. I hate that about Daisy so much because she's so only worried with the superficial things on the surface and nothing. She's just so worried about money and power, and she could care less about her own daughter. And that bothers me. That's probably one of the main things that bothers me the most about Daisy. So anyway, they get on another subject. They don't even talk about the baby, who's 3, by the way. And so they get to talking at the dinner table, okay? And finally, he figures out, at some point in chapter 1, he figures out that this other girl, her name is Ms. Baker, Jordan Baker. And towards the end of the chapter, he finds out, based on their conversation, that she's actually the Jordan Baker, she's a professional golfer. And that's how he knows her. He's heard her name, he's seen her picture, but she's a professional athlete, young woman. And it's kind of weird that she's even there. She just hangs out a lot with the Buchanans. So he's talking, though, at dinner, and this is when he meets Jordan. That's her name. And I do want to tell about his description. It says, I looked at Miss Baker, wondering what it was she got done. I enjoyed looking at her. She was a slender, small-breasted girl with an erect carriage, which she accentuated by throwing her body backward at the shoulders like a young cadet. Her gray, sun-strained eyes looked back at me with polite, reciprocal curiosity out of a wan, charming, discontented face. It occurred to me now that I had seen her or a picture of her somewhere before. You live in West Egg, she remarked. I know somebody there. I don't know a single. Oh, you must know Gatsby. Gatsby, demanded Daisy. What Gatsby? Before I could reply that he was my neighbor, dinner was announced. So you see right there's some foreshadowing, okay? They find out he lives in West Egg. Jordan says, well, you must know Gatsby. He's like, I don't know Gatsby. And Daisy's like jumping at the chance. What Gatsby? Well, that tells you right there that there's going to be some history. There's going to be some past there, okay? So this just is a little bit of character development. So they're sitting there. The table is served. The food is served on the table. And they're sitting there, and Jordan, Miss Baker, says, we ought to plan something, yawned Miss Baker, sitting down at the table as if she were getting into bed. All right, said Daisy, what'll we plan? She turned to me helplessly. What do people plan? So you can tell, these are just rich people who don't have anything to do in life. They just go from place to place spending their money, and they don't really care about anybody. And they just care about their money. They only care about themselves and their money. And so we get, she looks at her finger and it has a bruise on it. And she's like, oh, look, I hurt it. And then she says, oh, actually, you did it, Tom. So she tells her husband accusingly, I know you didn't mean to, but you did do it. That's what I get for marrying a brute of a man, a great big hulking physical specimen of a I hate the word brute, hulking, objected Tom crossly, even in kidding. Hulking, insisted Daisy. So you can tell that's the way they talk with one another. So they're talking, and he starts talking about a book that he has been recently reading. And it's called The Rise of the Colored Empires. And you find out pretty quick that Tom is an ignorant, racist pig. Okay, not only is he a very rich former athlete, has been cruel man, but he's also a racist pig. And he's reading this book and he starts talking about it, which is really ironic since he's really stupid. And it's kind of funny that he's even reading it all. So it says, well, it's a fine book and everybody ought to read it. The idea is if we don't look out, the white race will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific stuff. It's been proved. Oh, Tom's getting very profound, said Daisy, with an expression of unthoughtful sadness. He reads deep books with long words in them. Well, these books are all scientific, insisted Tom. This fellow has worked out the whole thing. It's up to us, who are the dominant race, to watch out that these other races don't have control of things. And so she kind of starts making fun of Tom, a little bit sarcastically. And then it says the telephone rang inside because they're kind of on a little porch eating, and the telephone rings and the butler leaves the porch, comes and whispers something in Tom's ear. And okay.